I've been out here. I'm a newcomer. I've been out here 28 years, and it is my home. I fell in love with it. I'm a Texan. I grew up in West Texas, but the Trans-Pecos has been my home for a long time, and I find myself serving as an ambassador a lot of times for the Trans-Pecos, because a lot of times we are outnumbered legislatively, populace-wise, etc., and people forget about us. And so we have to speak up when we can. And so Texas obviously is a booming state. We have over 30 million people scattered across 254 counties, with the bulk of them between I-35, I-45, and I-10. That concentration of population also gives urban matters a much louder voice when it comes to urban-rural challenges that tend to be increasing every day. Our ecoregion is special. Of all the ecoregions in Texas, it has one of the most highest biological diversity, and is heavily influenced by the contrast of elevation in our basins and ranges. From desert grasslands to cienagas to ponderosa pine forests, over 2,000 plant species, 500 bird species, 170 species of reptiles and amphibians, and over 120 mammals. And this is a desert. Most people don't think about all this diversity in the desert. But really, over the last 3 decades, we've seen a lot of challenges, a lot of changes coming our way. Recent challenges: energy sprawl, the border wall, AI centers, climate change and prolonged drought, light pollution, groundwater shortages, aging water infrastructure, and then a variety of emerging wildlife diseases such as chronic wasting disease, New World screwworm, Mycoplasma ovipneumonia, threaten our livelihood, our heritage, and our economy. Texans need the Trans-Pecos to seek adventure, explore their history and culture, for agricultural and economic prosperity, and to find reprieve and spirituality. Today, we're going to explore some of these challenges. This conference is meant to be a conversation, not a monologue. So that requires your part. Y'all outnumber us, but we are here for you. Over the last 10 months, again, we have been preparing to develop this program and talk about all these challenges. As natural resource professionals, and if you don't mind, if you're with Parks and Wildlife, BRI, or TWA, please raise your hand. All right, and there's other conservation professionals in this group also. Our whole job is to help you manage the resources that you have. We're here to help you be the best stewards that you can, and so that's what this whole conference is about. And so again, we expect participation and engagement. So let's get started with our first panel. And I'll introduce the panel speakers, and then they'll come up to the stage, and then Jim Bradbury will take over from there. Our first panelist is Judge Greg Henington, who was raised in Gatesville, Texas. He has a BBA in finance from Texas A&M and an MBA from University of Dayton. Most of y'all know our judge because he's very active. He's had multiple terms here in Brewster County. He oversees Brewster County Commissioner's Court. In a previous life, he was a banker, but he was also a recreationalist. He was one of the premier outdoor providers as far as providing experiences to people that come to the Big Bend through Far Flung Outdoor Center. And so let's please welcome Judge Henington to the stage. Our second panelist, if you spent any time over the last 30 years in Big Bend National Park, he really needs no introduction. That is Raymond Skiles. Raymond has been a wildlife biologist at the park for over 30 years. He is recently retired, but he stays pretty darn busy in his retirement. He is one of the best naturalists you'll ever meet, and such a great resource as far as the natural history of wildlife and natural things in the Trans-Pecos. He and his family own a property on the Rio Grande directly outside of Langtree. And so please let's welcome our good friend Raymond Skiles. And lastly, if you ever have eminent domain challenges or anything like that, this is the guy you need. Jim Bradbury is a friend of mine. Had a great hunt with him about 10 years ago chasing blue quail. When we crested that first hill chasing the blue quail, we all thought we were all going to throw up, to be honest. But he was a lot of fun to hunt with, and beyond the hunting, he knows agriculture law, he knows environmental law, he knows eminent domain, and so he is a premier authority for the issues associated around the Big Bend Wall and eminent domain. So please welcome Jim Bradbury.
Thank you, Lewis. That was the trip that told me that everything in West Texas is harder, taller, and it's got more cactus in it. But that was a good hunt. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're starting off controversy for breakfast. So thank you for joining all, and thank you both for making time to come and talk about this. You know, I've been thinking about this topic on the way out here in these days leading up, and you know, I think if Texas had a cathedral, it would be the Big Bend, without a doubt. And it is important to the people that live here like you all, but it's important to everybody in Texas. I mean, people revere this place, and it is certainly under threat, which I want to roll up our sleeves and talk about a little bit. But I think I'd like to strip out some of the issues because it's a policy problem, it's a concerning problem, it's an emotional problem, but it's also a wildlife problem. I mean, there's a lot of strands to this, so I really look forward to unraveling this with the two of you. But maybe before we begin, if each of you, Lewis introduced you, but those were his words. But I'd appreciate if you just give a couple of minutes each on, you know, how this hits you personally and professionally. Just push the button straight up. There you go. Each one of you before we begin. So Raymond, go ahead.
Okay. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. I think I'm invited because I'm the poster child for maybe bad luck in this situation. I was born here in Alpine, raised by itinerant school teachers throughout Permian Basin. And then we moved back when I was about 14 to the grandparents' ranch, Langtree, where basically life from then on was ranch work, hunting, fishing. My brother and I made our high school money trapping and selling furs, and it's becoming part of the natural community and particularly wildlife. So I went off to A&M and got a degree in wildlife biology, and then found the national parks and thought I was just going to be a park ranger because I loved it. And then I was told, well, you have a degree in biology. Why don't you be our first wildlife biologist at Big Bend? And I said, sure. And so for 30 years, that was the job. Right away, black bears coming on the scene, big mountain lion research projects, and on and on and on. So that's the career part. Now, the family part, today that, well, it was 4 generations that first came out there. I'm the third owner owning the property. And now the border wall is coming through it. Got letters from DHS that are pretty aggressive saying, you know, either agree to it or negotiate an agreement, or we're going to take it and come right through with a 180-foot wide swath of country taking for whatever we want to build. And so, yeah, we're losses in many ways. The national park, treasure of my life, really, the homeland, and the culture and history out here that I feel like I'm part of. Correct?
You know, you have 2 Aggies up. So I came at it as a little different way. I grew up in Coryell County, went to A&M, got out, worked for a little bank called Chase Bank. But in 1992, I decided that I would come out to the Big Bend. I had been coming out since I was in high school in the late 70s, and said, you know, I think I'm going to make a living as an outfitter. So for about 32 years, my wife and I owned an outfitting business in the Big Bend. So we're quite familiar with the park and the canyons of the Big Bend, and thought we would just ride off into the sunset. James King talked me into selling the business, and I was going to ride off in the sunset, and then some dummy decided to run for judge, and so here we are. But my background is really on the business side, not so much on the wildlife or natural resource side, but have come to understand it and love it over the years of being here in the Big Bend. So we've got some challenges, and we'll talk about them this morning.
Yeah, well, thank you. To that point, let's get to it here on consultation questions. And Raymond, first to you. You know, you had a long career, as you mentioned. Can you talk about the sort of over time, the park's relationship with Customs and Border Patrol and their presence in the park? And then, how's that changed over time from your perspective?
Sure. When I first came out to the park, that was actually 1979, there were typically 2 U.S. Border Patrol agents stationed in the park, living in the park, and one customs agent. He mostly chasing anybody might be smuggling drugs, the Border Patrol folks for most everything else. And over the years, it stayed pretty steady that way. However, after 2000, 2001, lots more funding coming in for Homeland Security. That number went up to 8 agents, and the relationship was and frankly is always good. The National Park Service appreciated having extra boots on the ground. Border Patrol, was working with the park rangers because they're all law enforcement, and funding started to come in for the national park to spend on drug interdiction and that sort of thing. So they worked very closely together. Personally, they were my neighbors and friends. And so, we felt like it was a common mission. In 2002, I believe it was, nationwide, the agency signed a memorandum of agreement that just kind of outlined how they would work together to achieve both agencies' missions while not, degrading or taking away from either one's. The one point I really want to emphasize here is that being on the ground with those folks, the ones who knew the country, knew the problem, knew the issue, here's what I heard over and over and over, that the Border Patrol agents said they were here to clean up the mess that Washington failed to address. Policies in Washington, they said, are what makes all the difference. That's what's going to dictate what's happening on the border. And, whether it's swung one way or another, those are the guys and women that had to deal with the residue of that. And for many of them, they thought their highest purpose was saving people that were trying to cross the desert and, could end up dead, as they occasionally do. So that's my experience, and I think it's still the same way. It's not the locals that are driving the border wall issue.
Before I go to Judge, Raymond, can you just comment? What is, you were there a long time. Can you give some perspective of the volume of traffic coming through there, people coming over the border? How big of a problem is it, or what did you see?
Well, frankly, during all this time, we had what I call 2 different kinds of folks coming across the border, sometimes illegally, sometimes legally. First was the local traffic, I'll call it. Folks who, had ranchitos on the south side of the border, and sure enough, their horses, cattle, and burro would be roving on both sides, and they would have to come over and get them and take them back, or folks that would come up and work at one of the concession companies in the park legally, but going back and forth to one of 4 different communities on the south side of the border. They were benefits. Did they all have their papers in order? I'm not sure. The Border Patrol learned to discern between that and recognize that their bigger mission was, yes, the folks who were trying to come in and stay in, and those that were obviously smuggling, contraband, illegal substances. And frankly, in my experience, not being for the most part, I was for a few years a law enforcement agent, it was always just a low ebb. You might hear about something that happened last week, or a group, that came through or got caught at the checkpoint a couple weeks ago. And even as things ramped up, and yes, the worst of it was basically 2002, 2003, again, because of Washington's neglect. There was more going on, but our operations went on, as normal. We never had any visitors nor staff that reported any kind of a, feeling of risk or threat. Frankly, the folks that were illegal didn't want to be seen. And for the most part, they weren't, unless you were searching for them. So during that time, there would be some pretty large groups occasionally. Shocking to realize that even buses were coming up to villages over really rugged dirt roads, and maybe 30 Salvadorans might come across, and the first thing they would do is find somebody with a green uniform and say, "We're presenting ourselves, take us in." So looking at the statistics now, even through that bad time, the Big Bend sector was, I believe, no more than 2% of the entire U.S.-Mexico borders numbers. The border's 2,000 miles long. The portion of the Big Bend sector, anyway, is about 300 of that. The greater Big Bend, including Big Bend and Del Rio sectors, is about 500 miles. And so a quarter of the entire border typically had, 2% or less. Narrow that down to the national park. Through all those years, it was far less than 1%, actually about 1%, 1% of 1%, 1/100. And so, it case cannot be said that relative to anywhere else, this was a high traffic part of the border.
Thank you, Raymond. Judge, go to you. I mean, as you've probably learned by now, it's not always fun being an elected leader during times of stress. And in terms of consultation, I want to ask you, I mean, the federal government posture has obviously changed in the last 18 months or so towards this particular region. And I mean, could you talk a little bit about the consultation, the contact that you're having with Customs Border Patrol, Department of Homeland Security, talking about this? Obviously, there's a lot of intensity and magnitude of emotions here, but I'm curious to know from your role what that consultation is like.
Well, when this first started, we sort of had hopes that we could sit down and have a dialogue about the idea that why would we take one of our most spectacular national parks that is from a tourism standpoint, generates a lot of business for our communities and our businesses, and didn't have a big problem with immigration. I was a paramedic for 30 years down on the border, and the number of times that I actually called on people that were in distress probably could count on maybe two hands. There were some that would try and not make it because of water and the country. So everybody in this room knows that the country itself is a wall. So when we first started, I was sort of optimistic that we could sit down and have a conversation about, okay, look, we're not anti-border security. I think everybody in the room wants a secure border, but there is proven technology. There has been existing technology that our law enforcement people have been using for years. We know the country better than anybody flying in from Washington. How about a little dialogue? And I think that's probably the thing that's disappointed me the most. I do meet every 2 weeks with the CBP people out of Washington and the local sector chief here in Border Patrol. And I think sometimes I'm a little slow, I think, as I get a little older, but it kind of dawned on me yesterday. We had a meeting yesterday, and it's like this is sort of like a Chinese water torture now. We're just getting drip a little bit at a time with not any real. We were hoping that they would roll out a plan, whether we like that plan or not. We kind of, here's our plan, here's what we're going to do, and yet what we have been finding is that we're getting it in little pieces and not all that accurate to begin with. So we're not going to stop having conversations. I don't think you get anywhere with shotguns and screaming and yelling, but I think what I would challenge everybody in this room to think about as they go home and back to their home base is the decision making is in Washington, and it needs to be hard pressed into Washington.
The contractors here on the ground, they're not, everybody's upset about that. They're here to do a job that they've been tasked to do. They're not the decision makers. The decision makers are in Washington or in our state government. So frustrated, more frustrated today than I was even 6 months ago. But we continue to work on it. We're hoping that we can still have that dialogue and show some ways that we can protect the border and not destroy a national and the economy that goes with that.
Yeah, along those lines, I mean, it's good that you're communicating and you're meeting with them regularly. I'm impressed that it's that frequent. But I mean, in your judgment, do you feel like they're being responsive to the input that you're giving on your behalf, as well as all the residents here? Or is it the case that the people you're meeting with here hear you, but it's really DC that's calling the shots? What's that dynamic like?
Yeah, I mean, if I call them, like yesterday we had a meeting, and so they've made a decision that they only want to speak to the county judges and the sheriffs. And so I was on the call with the judge yesterday with CBP and the county judge at Hudspeth County, Judge McKenzie. They've been responsive in situations where like yesterday, she had an issue where one of her roads was just being destroyed by the heavy truck traffic moving up and down it, to the point where the sand pit was this deep and the residents couldn't get to town. And she hammered them pretty good, and they will respond to those kinds of on-the-ground sorts of things. But in terms of us changing their mind and saying, okay, instead of doing this, why don't you do this? That's all out of Washington. It's clear to me now that the guys here have been told, go to Big Bend, build a wall, or build something like that. So we have got to double down our efforts back in Washington.
Well, good. Thank you. I mean, maybe to both of you, and get comments from each of you. I mean, maybe build a little trajectory, whatever time frame you want to talk about. Is how has this evolved over time? I mean, we know where we are right now, but let's go back and just talk about that evolution of how different where we are now is to how it used to be.
Well, how it used to be, of course, that puts a time scale in front of you. But I'll just go back, a decade. There was a previous time when, the border wall was conceived. And let's be real clear about this. This is not a partisan problem from its source. It was the Clinton administration in 96, I believe it was, that first authorized border wall construction and the waiver of a number of the most important laws that would not have prevented the actions, but would have simply made them smarter, made them consult with locals, officials, and biologists, wildlife people, etc. And then it wasn't until the early 2000s that same law was added. It went from a handful of laws being waived to 31 of them, I believe. That was under the Republican George W. Bush administration. So that's where the foundations are. But back in, I believe it was 2019, 18 or 19, the specter came over us. Most of the emphasis was further out west, actually where the potential of border wall making a difference, being a good deal, might have been real. But at that time, our federal representative Will Hurd and John Cornyn, the senator, and the governor of Texas came out and said, "Look, it doesn't make sense in the Big Bend. We've already got 100-foot to 1,500-foot cliffs, rugged country, no roads on the south side, very little on the north side, and it kind of just went away. The big difference now is that the folks in those same positions are quiet. We're not hearing from them. There's lots of calls, letters going in, but chirps. We don't even have a U.S. federal representative because of our step down in the midst of a scandal back in March, I believe it was, and nobody's been appointed to take the place, probably because they would be representing their constituents, and that might not be desirable. So if that is the change you're asking,
it is. I mean, it sort of makes me feel good to think back to that time. Judge, any comments on that?
No, I think Raymond's covered it.
Okay.
I think the thing that I resent the most is that there's absolutely there's a lot of smart people in this room in the county that I think could offer some really good solutions to this problem. And I think the thing that irritates me the most, well, the two things. One is that we're spending way too much time on this topic, and our folks are not focusing on their businesses and their livelihoods. They're having to fight their own federal government on this issue. And two, that we can't even get our own federal government to sit down on the table and discuss it. Those are the two things that probably...
Yeah, you're hitting right somewhere I wanted to go, which is to give recognition to the impact on the local community. I mean, this, Dr. Harveson alluded to this. I mean, the magic of this place is how few people there are. That's why when all of us who come out here, our blood pressure is lower, but it makes it very complex when the area is under threat of something like this. There are not many people here. How is the local community? Can you talk about some of those tensions that exist in the local communities, all the cities and the rural areas around here, how it's impacting them, and sort of how we can, address those concerns, or how they're being addressed?
Well, I mean, this has truly become, and it probably always has been, an economic issue. And that's sort of the angle that we're really pushing right now. And when the park superintendent comes to me and says, they're just going to put a man camp at Rio Grande Village, have a nice day, and then they're going to run 300 trucks a day through the national park. The light bulb on my little brain says that's an economic disaster. I mean, what visitor wants to come out and follow a sand truck around the park? Not to mention all the other risks associated with it. So this is a very, I mean, the problem is we really won't know for a little while how it's going to impact our tourism or our economy, but I don't want to wait around to find that out. So we're really pushing it on hard front to make sure Washington and the state of Texas understands this is an economic outfitters, people who are in our tourism economy, but that trickles all the way through restaurants, lodging, all of that sort of thing. So we're very concerned about it, and I'm like Raymond. It's been a struggle to try to figure out how to get to the right people to let that be known. Now, we've seen some things recently. I think Don Buckingham's recent shot over the bow about the GO.
That felt good for a while, didn't it?
It's a nice step. I understand last couple of days, New Mexico has stopped some drilling of water wells in along the wall. I think there's some little cracks that maybe give us some hope that we can find a solution to this.
Good, thank you. We're at a wildlife conference, so let's maybe shift gears and talk a little bit about, because I think it's probably an under-discussed impact of the wall, is the impact of wildlife corridors and the environment there. And Raymond, there's been a lot of discussion, if you're reading the news, about environmental laws and waivers of environmental laws by Washington, including the wild and scenic designation that was done to fast track. I mean, can you comment on that? I mean, is there a real precedent for that? Have you seen it before? Or, how does that sit with you?
To start with, I've never seen anything like this before, and obviously, with a career in the federal government, the National Park Service, I've been part of most of those laws. Many of you maybe met me at a public meeting that the National Park Service was having up here in Alpine or the neighboring communities to talk about, some change, some new construction. And typically that took several phases. The first would be to go out and just send a letter saying, hey, we're thinking about this. Tell us what you think. And then come up with a basic plan, but a couple alternatives, and then go around and say, well, do you have input on these alternatives, which might work better, or give us another one. And that wasn't, out of the goodness of our heart. It was the federal law called the National Environmental Policy Act. That name doesn't fit it very well because in the law it says the human environment, but includes endangered species and wildlife impact. So there is at the top of my list. That's why we're not having meetings with DHS and started a year ago to get the input of people who are knowledgeable on the subject. That law got waived. I even kind of hate to use that term. Ignored is what it allows. You don't have to think about it. I made a short list of ones maybe you're familiar with out of those 31. The Endangered Species Act, the Archaeological Resource Protection Act, the Clean Water Act, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act, the National Park Service Organic Act, and get this, that was passed in 1917, and it said the parks will be to conserve the scenery and wildlife for benefit of future generations. Think about that for a little bit. The Wilderness Act, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, the Native American Graves Protection Act, and on and on and on. And so that's what's not happening now. I think all of us have been frustrated sometimes with the bureaucracy, making it hard to get things done. But frankly, I'm proud that we would go to the public for all these issues, including most recently in my career was the exotic animal management plan for the park to try to deal with feral hogs, audads, even trespass livestock from Mexico that were contrary to the mission of the national park. So all of those things are what got waived, and that is why we're not hearing even landowners like myself. We've got nobody to talk to. A contractor coming along is the best we've had yet, other than what little bit gets fed through county judges, in my case, Palo Verde County. So that's the situation we're in. Those laws that were intended to have better outcomes, regardless of how challenging that might be. And here we have an example of how that goes astray into a train wreck, and the outcome is not good.
Thank you. Judge Henington, want to ask you about, kind of same topic, but on the local level. I mean, I've been trying to follow this county to county, how each one of them are dealing with it. But I mean, have local laws and permitting process, have they been waived or ignored by the process? So answer that, and then I've got a follow-up.
So the answer is absolutely not. We haven't waived any of our regulations. No, we don't have a lot of them because as a county, we don't have the, we're sort of a subset of the state. But I will say emphatically is your commercial trucks need to be properly licensed, inspected. Okay, so we just can't let all this traffic come through our country and then they leave in 2 years and all our roads are torn up. So number one, we're working on the traffic side. 2, groundwater. We have a groundwater district. We have groundwater rules. We're expecting and demanding that those to be followed. And the good news is that the park has indicated that they've got some precedent. Well, they did before all this happened. They used our groundwater district for that permitting, and they asked us to do that again. So we're hoping we can use the groundwater and then septic tanks and human waste disposal. So those are our 3 big hammers that we've got. They're not the greatest, but those are the ones that we do have, and we will enforce those to the letter of the law.
I mean, by and large, we'll say the contractors or the federal government element here, are they honoring that jurisdiction and role that the counties have?
It's too early to tell. We haven't seen anything yet on the violation of those. I was just talking to the sheriff this morning before I came here. As I come to work every morning, there's a significant increase in truck traffic going on 118, which really was designed for a tourism economy, not an oil field economy. And so there's been some heavy trucks moving up and down the road. I've had a couple of breakdown on the road, and that's going to happen. I understand that, but so far I haven't heard anything. But we're watching.
Well, so far so good. How about? I mean, obviously, as big as this project is, I mean, it's impacting multiple counties. How are you interacting with your counterparts in the other counties that are impacted?
Well, each county is unique. There's no doubt about it. Judge Portillo, Judge Evans, Judge McKenzie, all of us along the border have worked. We frequently talk to each other about our particular issues. I think it's been clear that there's been one voice that has opposed this wall from the day one, and that's pretty much all the county judges and sheriffs along this border corridor. I think one of the things I want to say, though, I want people to think about. So we don't have a lot of vast places left in this country, and this is one of them. This is a corridor of a place that people could come out and find a solitude and a wildlife and experience the outdoors. We don't have a lot of that left, but I want people to imagine you put in at Lajitas on a South Atlanta river trip, and today you can go 21 miles through Santa Atlanta Canyon and experience one of the last truly remote wilderness experiences in the lower 48. You can do that in Mariscal Canyon. You can do that in Boquillas Canyon. Now, in today's world, you're looking at putting in at Lajitas, and as you float down that river to the canyon, 9 miles. It's 9 miles before you get to the canyon, Santa Atlanta Canyon. On your left will be a fence 6 foot high with a top railing, and a road follows that fence all the way down to the entrance of the canyon. Now, what kind of a wilderness experience is that? Okay, what does that do to the vastness and the experience that people, and do that in Mariscal Canyon, and then do that again in Boquillas Canyon. And when you start thinking about how that's going to take away from the experience, guys, if we had 1 million people moving across the border and we couldn't stop it, that might be a different issue, but we don't. So we're going to build a lateral road along the river in the floodplain. We're going to put a 4 to 6 foot high top rail fence so that, anybody can climb over it, but the outfitters can't get through it. And we're going to do that for what reason? So I want people to think about that. I would challenge people in the room to get outraged about that and help us push Washington on this.
I mean, I can just envision people in D.C. Thinking, well, it's just a road. It's just a road. But that perspective is a good one. Is like a road. I mean, it's a real blight on the entire experience out there.
That's correct.
Yeah. Raymond, to go to you, I'm finally going to let you talk about your area of expertise, but I mean, talk a little bit about migratory wildlife corridors that exist in that and how they will be in. I mean, you've got bighorn sheep, black bears, mountain lions moving through there, and all this infrastructure, all this equipment and construction. How's that going to impact the wildlife?
Well, I think maybe the first concept is that you, I, and everyone we know has already made a difference. The first proposal and the first letter that us landowners got in the parks received was for a 30-foot steel bollard wall for the entire region, Fort Hancock to Del Rio. And obviously, Dr. Harveson's group, the Borderland Research, lots of others, wildlife advocates were raising hell about that, largely because the species you mentioned the bears, about mule deer, even the javelina, anything that's can't get through a 4-inch wide slot it's going to be over for any kind of access to water, to migratory paths. The black bears, one that I spent most of my career really working at in the park, they came from Mexico. And during hard times, guess where they would go when there wasn't enough to eat in the Chizos? Over to the Sierra del Carmen or the Serranías del Burro below Sanderson. Survive and then come back. And the most important thing for their future is to have more populations in the mountains on both sides of the border. We still need that on the U.S. side, and to cut off, the sort of the mother lode. I've often heard or seen a good analogy is that we have bears living on islands. The mainland is over in Mexico. Think about shutting them off from their mainland. But the response by wildlife advocates of all stripes got that backed off, and it became a lesser evil of the vehicle barrier that Greg just described, and that's a lot better. But upstream, Big Bend Ranch State Park, all the way up to Fort Hancock, they're still facing the bollard barrier issue. From a landowner's perspective, hunter's perspective, when you have a water source, slender as it might be during drought, all along a linear reach, that's a great deal more opportunity. If you have to back that off to only wells and troughs for your wildlife and your livestock, you're concentrating everything right there. Disease transmission, predator effects will be heightened, and then obviously the bighorn sheep restoration has been a major project for nearly 40 years. Success for the most part, but slowly. Now they also are transboundary in the Big Bend Ranch State Park and upstream across from the Chinades. Many of those are going to be cut off. And so the vehicle barrier is better than the solid steel wall. That's still a 185-foot wide swath that will be placed north of the border. Exotic grasses are a huge problem down in that region, and other species invading. And where do they go? Where do they get their foothold? Disturbed soil. So that'll be the biggest new disturbance that the region has ever had, fostering exotic invasive species in our parks and our private ranches and native lands. I'm just hitting the high spots here. We could talk about the lights that might be on the wall. There's a whole suite of accessories be put in, power, fiber optic, light poles, camera poles, and at least a 25-foot wide swath of bare ground just for the visual patrol benefits of it, and access roads. We rarely talk about all the new roads that won't be along the barrier, but that will be built through properties that aren't even on the river to get to it and maintain it. So I could go on and on. That's a start.
I wanted you to take a big swing, and you did. Thank you for that. Last thing, we're going to go to some questions here from the audience to hear from you. So we've got a microphone. So if you've got a question, raise your hand, and we'll get to the microphone. As we're gravitating, Judge, I'd just like you to make a couple of comments. I mean, we are heading to a more difficult time. I mean, lawyers are getting involved, right? Landowners are being told the phrase one of you uttered, if you don't agree, we will take it. And nothing sends bigger chills down my spine for Texas landowners than that. Can you talk about that while our first question is raised? I mean, where we're headed with that?
Well, I mean, the landowner situation is rough, and I know folks are are really fighting back on it. I don't have a lot of new information on that. I will tell you that it sounds like we're sort of down in the dumps, and maybe we are frustrated, but our foot is not off the gas on this issue. And we were going to continue to keep our foot on the gas until we get some resolution to this. And I wish I could answer the private landowners thing, but I think everybody out there, from No Big Ben Wall to the coalitions that have been formed around private landowner rights, are doing a great job.
Well, it's good. It's important because, I mean, some of this problem, we're all bearing it together, but certainly when it comes to taking one's own private property, that is something that's a lonely experience to have to go through. Questions?
The question, where you at in the first Trump administration, they contracted us, they spent a ton of money building the drone fence rather than a physical fence. And it seems to me saying no without an alternative is a no-win proposition. So where is the discussion associated with, what during the first Trump administration is going to be a drone, not a physical, and then the Biden administration tore that up. We use that facility for a different manner now, but it seems to me that a far better argument is drones yes, wall no. If you just say no to everything, that's a losing proposition. Where are you at on the drone solution that was in the first Trump administration?
I can't speak specifically to the drones, but I know our sheriff has talked about that. We've used that effectively in some of our law enforcement activities along the border. We also use satellite coordination. And I teased somebody the other day, if we can sit in the White House and watch Osama bin Laden get blown up in his house, I don't know why we can't use some of the similar technology in Big Bend. But having said that, we've not heard a word. I think what's happened is $46 billion, big, beautiful bill. Let's go. Here's your contracts. Start running. So we're totally, we're saying no wall, but let's use technology that we've been using for years. But we're not getting any feedback about that. That's an alternative for it.
I'll jump in a little bit. And a very legitimate question. And nobody here is saying we don't need strong border security. Like I mentioned, it starts in Washington with the policies. But you brought up technology. And Thaddeus Stevens, the Carroll County Sheriff, has been a leading advocate for that alternative. He calls them Predator B drones. He's familiar with them from military use and a little bit within the Border Patrol, which he's retired from, now county sheriff. And folks like that, with that history, say, yes, that is the better solution. The terrain out here doesn't let anybody come across in most of the region, so they know exactly where to look. The few trails that come up, side canyons, where you don't have to have, Jumar climbing ascenders. And if you can keep tabs on those routes and be able to respond to that, you're much better off. But yes, that technology is available. It's being proposed as an alternative, but alternatives aren't being considered now, while we seem to have only one $7 billion steel wall or barrier solution. So we look forward to letting the people who know how to use technology be unleashed and show us what they claim will work.
Other questions?
I mean, we know this is a horror, and the more you talk, the more of a horror it is. But what I want to know is, what can we do? Who do we write? What do we do? We need to have, take action. All of us care. So what can we do to stop this horrible thing?
I tell a story for those of us old enough to remember. In the 1960s, you'll remember that the federal government wanted to dam the Grand Canyon. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but they were going to put dams all through the Grand Canyon. Can you imagine that? The American people were enraged by that concept. It didn't help that the federal government went after the tax exempt status of the Sierra Club, which further raise the American people. But it got stopped. So it can be done. It was done. It's been done in a number of cases. And so I think we can do it here. My answer to you is it's beyond a local thing. It's beyond the contractor thing. Beating up the contractor at this stage of the game is a day late and a dollar short. Well, we don't have a representative right now, but as soon as we do, you need to be writing to them, Cornyn, Cruz, the governor, the lieutenant governor. All of those people need to be actively involved with your letter writing. And I know it's tedious, and I know it sounds like a placating, but that is truly the answer. We have got to get into Washington and start changing the minds of what's happening down here. Well, your senator, you've got Cornyn, what's left of Cornyn's term, but don't rule him out. So keep writing him. You've got Senator Cruz. Those are your two allies now. We don't have Gonzalez, and we won't have a new representative in the 23rd until November. But it doesn't hurt to keep bringing them in the loop. They're aware of it. You've got some candidates running for the U.S. Senate and other congressional races. They certainly should be aware of it. They can't influence anything until they get into office. But yeah, I would, even the DA, Homeland Security, Mr. Mullins, I think that's another one you can certainly write to.
And I think it's clear that works. We haven't gotten much feedback in public from some of our federal representatives and senators, but all the calls and letters that were made to them, I think even those folks did some backroom deals. They didn't come out to the public, but they're the ones, I'm confident, that got the 30-foot wall put on hold, and at least a compromise with the vehicle barriers. So we have to step that effort up. Now, there is one other avenue that I hope might be effective before it's too late, and that is taking it to the big courts. Us landowners go to lawyers who say, yeah, we'll help negotiate you a better deal. But when we ask them, well, isn't there something wrong? The law said it was supposed to be areas of high illegal trafficking. There was supposed to be area-specific analysis to demonstrate the need for this resolution. Those things aren't happening. Can't somebody, i.e. a judge, say, look, back off until you have met the criteria that allows the waivers. And there are a couple of lawsuits. I know one that's about to be filed that is not just, the locals trying to get, a higher price for their land. It is to hopefully get at least a stay of work while maybe they're required to do that due diligence that the law required in the first place, and nobody got around to doing. So let's hope for that. But your calls, your letters are what is the biggest potential to make a difference.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Alvarado. I'm with No Big Bend Wall, and I can answer a lot of these questions at our table out here when this is over. But I do have a question for you. They are already clearing land in Santa Elena Canyon. They're already moving in. What kind of migratory disruptions will we see just from that construction already?
Are you speaking of wildlife?
Yeah. Well, they're already clearing swaths of land through floodplains. I don't know if you've seen the news lately. It's about to hit pretty hard, but they've been there the past couple days. Are we going to see wildlife disruptions just from that? And I want to know what to extent are we going to see just from that damage that's already being done?
Well, that is in the floodplain. It is riparian environment. That is not the dry desert with cactus. It's where the trees are, the deep soils there with some water in the soil already. So that's the highest value wildlife habitat that we've got, and they're literally bringing it down to powdered dirt. So I think that speaks for itself. Now, that is the first place that they are also destroying federally listed threatened species habitat, the yellow-billed cuckoo, cousin of the roadrunner. That is the area that they are identified in the national park. And so the dozers are going to be taking out that habitat without the waivers of the Endangered Species Act. There would have at least been a discussion about it. Can you go a little further to the north and avoid that habitat? Are there some mitigations, like doing it, a little further past the nesting season? But no, ignore all that. Not a problem. Bulldoze down that species habitat, and that's exactly what's going on. So that's the top answer.
Anybody else? One more? I do. Two quick things. On the drone question, that's one thing, but I live in West Jeff Davis County, and I look at the aerostats south of Valentine from my ranch every day. And you know what? Don't like it, but you live with it. But I have a technical intelligence background. You could just put more aerostats, and it would be even much more cost-effective than trying to keep Reaper, Predator drones flying across the border. Much more effective. And the type of sensors that exist today in infrared and other spectrums, you could have a huge deterrent effect. Number two is, worst case scenario, a lot of this gets built. Maybe you can drag time out for a while and outlast this administration or whatever. My question to you is, if some of this is built and a new administration comes in and, God willing, it gets pulled back out again, how much more of an environmental impact is that going to have trying to go in and spend billions more removing all this stuff if it eventually gets built and then overread?
My money's on it gets built. 2 years from now, it gets abandoned, and just sits there and decays for the next 50 years. My personal opinion is they won't spend the money to take it out, but they won't spend the money to maintain it. So there it sits. All the roads will wash away. They'll move away in the floods. All that infrastructure work will be left with a very ugly natural resource. Personal opinion. I don't know. I don't know that the next administration, whoever that is going to have the desire to do what we're doing now. So I think it's just going to get, like everything else, it's going to get abandoned. And the park's not getting. So the other thing is, park's not getting any additional resources. None. They're not getting any. They got a 300-person man camp coming down to Rio Grande Village. No extra law enforcement officers. Going to put additional burden on our EMS and sheriff's office. Border Patrol's not getting an additional. They're not getting any additional manpower. If you talk to the Border Patrol guys, they're not getting any more manpower for this thing. So they're building this huge infrastructure, but they don't have any more manpower to get it done. So that's my opinion.
Good question. Great way to round up. I'd love to sit up here, but I don't think they would permit us to do it. But first off, I want to thank both of you. One, for your time this morning, but two, for all your earnest determination on this issue. I know it's hard and takes a lot of your personal time to do it, but thank you very much. But thanks for joining us this morning. Let's give them a big round of hands.